but there is an ongoing conflict, which the Spartans did get their butts kicked, and so Athens currently is in a state of pretty decent confidence. They're already at war with Persia, actually, because because the Athenian tyrant Hippias, after being ousted in Athens, he then goes around Greece trying to rally support, but then he goes to Persia in order for all the gold and all the soldiers to retake his city. The Persians, in fact, demand that the Athenians restore Hippias to his former title, but they refuse, and so Athens is technically in a state of revolt against the Persian Empire already. But that's sort of the state of affairs on mainland Greece. Athens is recently democratic, unified, won a string of military victories, feeling relatively confident, and Sparta is in a state of having lost a conflict of Athens, but the ruling dynasty, the ruler of Sparta, Cleomenes, is also in a pretty insecure political situation because his only heir during the revolt is, I believe, a 10-year-old daughter by the name of Gorgo, and thus his succession isn't quite secure. So this is not a sort of state of affairs where Sparta is feeling particularly adventurous.
So how did the conflict start to, come about in Ionia itself?
So the conflict actually begins in Naxos, which is situated in the central Aegean. It's between Ionia, mainland Greece, and Crete. It's in that sort of archipelago of islands called the Cyclades. And what happens is, during the factionalism that usually impacts Greek cities, several Naxian noblemen end up getting driven out as part of a sort of democratic revolution. And these Naxian exiles end up in Miletus, where they connect with our first protagonist of the tale, a fellow by the name of Aristagoras, who is currently serving as the sort of quasi tyrant of Miletus. He's actually a deputy of his father in law, a man named Histiaeus, who's currently serving as an advisor in the Persian court. Now, what happens is these Naxian noblemen, they come to Aristagoras, and he says, and they basically say, "Hey, we want you to, if you can help us restore our positions, and we will be loyal to Persia, and we'll be allies of you. Plus, we have loads of money that you might be interested in if you take
All
back Naxos."
It's not a bribe, right? It's a donation.
It's so what happens. So Greek cities, Greek exiles love doing this, where usually if you're being driven out of a city, you've sequestered quite a lot of money that you've earned through your, let's say public service, and you show all this money to a potential benefactor or someone who can help you return home and restore your regime. And so this sort of entices them to think, oh, well, oh, wow, like that's quite a lot of money these exiles have. We should perhaps invade this place because they must have more. They must have more money where that came from. And so it's a pretty enticing thing to do. It actually does happen. This is actually a very sort of similar start to the Sicilian expedition during the Peloponnesian War, where a Greek city actually brings basically their entire treasury over to Athens and says, "Yep, this is only a small fraction of our riches. Please come invade Sicily, and there's so much more that you can find here."
That's amazing.
But yeah, it's one of those sort of diplomatic tricks that the Greeks at least like to pull according to the histories. But this works. Aristagoras says, "You know what? I agree to this expedition, but I do have to get authorization from the Persian satrap, who's basically a regional governor." And the satrap is a man by the name of Artaphernes, who is a relative of the current king of Persia, Darius the First.
I
So
just preferred his Age of Empires portrait and not the actual one. So, but I think Artaphernes was not in high favor, like very high favor with the Great King, right? At this time.
he's the satrap of Sardis. So he's basically just a regional governor on the western fringe of the Persian Empire. He is he is within the sort of royal family, as it were, but it's sort of unclear how much influence he actually has over the king, especially compared to a figure like Histiaeus, the current actual tyrant of Miletus, who is sort of in favor and is sort of a trusted advisor of Darius. But yeah, Darius gives his royal assent for this expedition to take place, and Artaphernes is actually very generous because he's looking at Naxos and he sees a springboard in which to exert control over the Aegean on behalf of the Persian Empire due to Naxos's central position in the Aegean Sea. And so he's basically looking at this and seeing drachma signs or like Persian Daric signs are going off in his eyes. So he actually
I'm
doubles.
imagining the cartoon image, right?
Yeah,
When the eyes go
yeah,
dark.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. And so he actually doubles the number of ships that the Persians and send to Naxos. And it's never a
How
good
big was it?
sign.
How big was the invasion force?
Um,
Because I read like the king also sent several squadrons.
yeah. So they send a pretty substantial army, and so the Persians send a fleet of 200 ships over to Naxos, and about 8,000 soldiers, with the expectation that the Naxians, upon seeing this armada and all of these Persian soldiers, will just open the gates and let back the Naxian exiles. And so they're not expecting a very sort of big fight, let's say. The problem is that a Persian commander by the name of Megabates, who's also a member of the royal house, he he's also sent to command the Persian forces. And there seems to be a bit of a mix-up because, or at least tension, some ambiguity, which is never a good sign for the hierarchy of a military expedition. Because nominally Aristagoras, the architect of this venture, he's supposed to be an overall commander. However, Megabates is a member of the royal house. He's a member of the Achaemenid family. Close. He's connected to the great King Darius. He's expecting a more sort of. He's expecting to be a bit high ranking than Aristagoras.
So they've never really clearly established who's like overall commander, and egos
Yeah,
clash.
yeah. This really goes sort of bites them because during an inspection of the fleet at the island of Chios, which is also a large island in Ionia, it turns out that one of the Ionian captains doesn't set a watch, and Megabates takes it upon himself to punish him, and he punishes him in the very creative way of sticking his head basically through the sort of oar hole of one of the triremes and tying him up over there. Aristagoras gets wind of this because the person being tied up is actually one of his mates. So he demands that releases him, and when Megabates refuses, he he unties him himself and rebukes him by saying, "But you, what have you to do with these matters? Did not Artaphernes send you to obey me and to sail wherever I bid you? Why are you so meddlesome?" So he's clearly under the impression that he's an overall command of the expedition, to the extent that he actually rebukes a member of the Persian royal family, albeit a bit of a minor royal, but it's a bold move indeed.
Hmm, could be pretty detrimental for your career efforts, I guess.
Yeah, you might want to take this into consideration as the story goes
This,
on.
I
Mega,
just want to say this kind of sounds like how the Venetians and Genoans were fighting before the Battle of Lepanto.
yeah,
It really
it,
feels something like that.
yeah, it's actually a point that I want to make about the overall account of the Ionian Revolt and to an extent of the Persian Wars. Herodotus is writing in the sort of 5th century, and 5th century Greeks, and just Greeks throughout their history, are really fascinated by internal factionalism and conflict. They really dislike it. They really hate strife. The goddess Eris Strife is not a good goddess. You don't want to like say prayers to her for her to be on your side. You don't want to like be offering your best cow or whatever. But they are also simultaneously fascinated by human conflict and conflict within sort of cohesive sort of internal bodies. And so this is going to be sort of a recurring theme of disunity and internal conflicts throughout Herodotus's account. But Megabartes is like super angry at this. And so what he does, according to Herodotus, is that he sends a message over to the Naxians, warning of them of the impending Persian attack. This this is
Wow.